The movement was a term coined in 1954 by J.D.Scott, literary editor of the Spectator, to describe a group of writers including Philip Larkin, Kingsley Amis, Donald Davie, D.J. Enright, John Wayne, Elizabeth Jennings, Tom Gunn, and Robert Conquest. The movement was essentially English in character, as poets from other parts of the United Kingdom of Great Britain and Northern Ireland were not actively involved. Description: although considered a literary group, members of the movement saw themselves more as an actual movement, with each writer sharing a common purpose. The movement poets were considered anti-romantic, but Larkin and Hughes featured romantic elements. To these poets, good poetry meant simple, sensuous content and traditional, conventional, and dignified form. The movement's importance is its worldview that took into account Britain's reduced dominance in world politics. The group's objective was to prove the importance of English poetry over the new modernist poetry. The members of the movement were not anti-modernists, they were opposed to modernism, which was reflected in the Englishness of the poetry. The movement sparked the divisions among different types of British poetry. The poems were nostalgic for the earlier Britain and filled with pastoral images of the decaying way of life as Britain moved farther from the rural and more towards the urban. Representative collections. The movement produced two anthologies, Poets of the 1950s and New Lines. Conquest, who edited the New Lines anthology, described the connection between the poets as little more than a negative determination to avoid bad principles. These bad principles are usually described as excess both in terms of theme and stylistic devices. Poets in the original New Lines anthology in 1956 included Kingsley Amis, Robert Conquest, Donald Davie, D.J. Enright, Tom Gunn, John Holloway, Elizabeth Jennings, Philip Larkin, and John Wayne. The polemic introduction to New Lines particularly targeted the 1940s poets, the generation of Dylan Thomas. In 1963, a sequel to the original New Lines anthology, titled New Lines 2, was published. It included many of the authors from the original anthology, as well as younger English poets like Thomas Blackburn, Edwin Brock, Hilary Cork, John Fuller, Ted Hughes, Edward Lucy Smith, Anthony Thwaite, and Hugo Williams. Decline. The Angry Young Men movement occurred in 1956 during the turning point of the movement. Lodge attributed the movement's decline to the publication of the New Lines anthology. Afterwards, the group became less exclusive. It was no longer requisite for members to fight and defend one another's work, as they had become accepted members of the literary world. The group's members included Philip Hobsbawm, Alan Brown, John Adrian Mitchell, Peter Porter, Edward Lucy Smith, and George Macbeth, Ian Hamilton's Review School, and Michael Horowitz's Children of Albion. The group was similar to the movement, as they shared similar ideas about the form and seriousness of modernist poetry.